blah 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 blah. Everyone shut up. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Felix, and welcome to tonight's presentation of Felix and Wolf's Cyberpunk Adventures, Episode 3, our Cyberpunk 2077 Review and Analysis. Before we begin, we have to warn our audience of 3 different things before the episode starts. First of all, Cyberpunk 2077 is a mature title meant for mature gamers, although, frankly, I would put quotations on the word mature. Regardless, it is nonetheless a mature title, and as such, it contains content that is not suitable for all audiences. We've elected to age restrict this video as a result, because while we were able to turn off the nudity in this game, we were not able to toggle off things like the violence, the other sexual content, swearing, and other things. So basically, if you're under the age of 18, please leave. I mean, frankly, how you got past the age restriction, I have no idea, but if you're somehow still here, leave. Alright, that business taken care of. The second warning is that this will contain full spoilers for Cyberpunk 2077, including its main story and side stories. So, if you're not interested in having all of those spoiled, please also leave our auditorium. Okay, are most of everyone gone? Great! The third and final warning is that this entire review and analysis was written and created circa December 2020. As such, it doesn't reflect any future updates that Cyberpunk 2077 gets. It's furthermore our own personal experience, and we were playing this on an Xbox One X. And I think that's all of everything that I needed to say. Anyway, thank you for listening, and please enjoy tonight's presentation. Gosh darn it, I don't want to do this again. Hello everyone, welcome to Felix and Zwolf's Cyberpunk Adventures. My name is Felix, and that's Zwolf, Bomb18, and our newest member, Belle. She will be handling all of our communications and tasks during our adventures, which will be kinda needed cause, after the last incident with that mech, the store is flat broke, and we've been relegated to the basement of the mall where there are no shops, and the only thing you can hear is the tears of those who couldn't get a good deal on overpriced goods. Anyway, what's our mission for today, Belle?
Hopefully something crazy.
Well, we were, but have you seen the news about this game lately?
Cyberpunk 2077,
Yeah, it's definitely a different game than we've been expecting, both in terms of what surrounds it and the game itself. I remember watching that teaser trailer 8 years ago and, like many, being awed by the world it presented of a dark and dystopian future, filled with neon lights and strange technology. It was teased back in 2012, but no new news came out about it until 2018. That was because of The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. In hindsight, it was likely a bad idea to announce Cyberpunk 2077 in 2012, as it caused considerable amounts of hype and anticipation that just really couldn't be met. But that was the mood when it was re-announced in 2018, and we couldn't wait until the title was released. In 2019, it was finally announced, along with the addition of one Keanu Reeves, that Cyberpunk 2077 would be officially released on April 16th, 2020. Then that became September 2020. Then that became November 2020. And then it finally became December 2020. When Cyberpunk 2077 was finally released, man, it was a whirlwind of controversy and disappointment. Whether it was CD Projekt Red restricting access to the console versions of the title with reviewers before launch, the poor performance of the base PS4 and Xbox One versions, and the controversies surrounding refunds that culminated in unprecedented actions by Sony to remove the title from the PS Store. Correct. Nonetheless, we feel obligated to review and analyze Cyberpunk 2077. Not only so those in the audience can make an informed decision about it, but because Cyberpunk 2077 means a lot to us. It's basically the reason why we exist.
Really, this entire series would not exist without Cyberpunk 2077. It was the thing that inspired me to make Phasca happen. Also, why the frick are you in my room?
We also want to address something up front. Cyberpunk 2077 is neither a stable nor polished experience. You guys obviously know about the myriad of graphical issues that are present in the base PS4 and Xbox One versions of Cyberpunk 2077. But there are other issues also present on other versions of the title. Our Xbox One X, a console that was bought only this year and is one of the most powerful of the last generation, suffered from issues ranging from glitches, slowdowns, to 5 complete game crashes. For the record, we have no idea whether that was particularly caused by Cyberpunk 2077 or not, but the fact that it happened with all the glitches, game crashes, and things like that we've experienced, yeah, we think it's related, but we don't know for sure. Regardless, I understand that large open-world titles tend to have a ton of issues on launch that are eventually fixed later. I recall Fallout 4 was a mess when it launched in 2015, but it was eventually fixed. I no doubt Cyberpunk 2077 will be a similar case, but CD Projekt Red should have been honest about the state of the console versions before launch. It is simply unacceptable for a title like this to be released in this state, and I do not want to hear arguments that I should have invested in a high-performance PC or one of the next generation of consoles like the Xbox Series X or the PlayStation 5, because these were the consoles Cyberpunk 2077 was meant to be released on, as next-generation consoles did not exist when Cyberpunk 2077 was originally announced nor released, with the original dates of March 2020 and September 2020. And that's to not recommend Cyberpunk 2077, despite all the good stuff we're about to say, until these issues are fixed, especially on consoles. We expect a higher level of quality when it comes to releases like this, and while we understand there are always going to be a few hiccups with every game, this is far more than a few hiccups. Underneath this technical mess, it's also a fantastic title, and that's what we're going to explore today. In Cyberpunk 2077, you play a character named V, a male or female protagonist who is a mercenary with a backstory determined by you. These backstories include Street Kid, Corpo, and Nomad. It doesn't seem to have a larger impact on the story, except in some smaller ways, such as the opening and dialogue choices. Main events will still happen no matter what, such as the death of your friend Jackie Wells. It's a bit disappointing, as it really does not allow the level of immersion hyped for Cyberpunk 2077. In fact, I wouldn't even call Cyberpunk 2077 an RPG. On the Twitter account for Cyberpunk 2077, they even describe it as a, quote, open-world action-adventure story. But that wasn't always the descriptor. Using the Internet Archive Wayback Machine, we can find that it originally described the game as, quote, the role-playing game of the dark future. So, why the change, and which is it? Well, I have a theory. Cyberpunk 2077 was intended to be an RPG similar to what it's based on, Cyberpunk 2020. We still see the remnants of that with the customization you have with your character, including the customization that I wish I never saw and would like to wipe my brain off as soon as I can. And these slightly different dialogue choices and events. However, this changed at some point during development, likely due to the starting to be documented issues of said development, to be more of an open-world action-adventure game instead of an RPG. Now, this is only a theory of mine based on what I have read and things like that, but it doesn't change the fact that Cyberpunk 2077 was originally meant as an RPG. As an RPG, Cyberpunk 2077 fails miserably, especially when considering the marketing that surrounded the title that left there would be more intricate immersion than what we got in the final product. But as an open world action adventure game like GTA 5, it's honestly not that bad. I would say that the main story backing said open world action adventure game has a solid foundation, even if it is a bit basic. As an interesting idea about a chip inside your head holding the conscience of someone, with it being a race against time to remove said chip while also learning about whom is on that chip. On the surface, it seems like an average story that you would find in any sort of cyberpunk work, but they mainly use it as an excuse to allow the player to do all sorts of different and fun things, ranging from a heist to steal the aforementioned chip, which, by the way, I would argue is literally the height of the game, to hijacking a parade float, to an assault on Arasaka Tower. So, while the story might be standard fare for cyberpunk fiction, it basically uses it as an excuse to have a lot of fun story beats and things for you to do, which I don't really mind. Sometimes story needs to be a bit basic so you can develop it and have fun with it. Even if this main story is a bit standard but still fun, the side quests are really when Cyberpunk 2077 shines. There are so many to do that it can be overwhelming, but you should absolutely take the time to do them because they are some of the most interesting side quests I have ever experienced. Some of my favorites were the ones with the Delamain AI. Seriously, that GLaDOS cameo was unexpected and hilarious. And the entire story with Best Girl Panam, who is the best romantic choice and the only romantic choice, and I refuse to be told otherwise. It is nonetheless really where the title shines the most, and once Cyberpunk 2077 is all fixed up, I'll try to do all of them. It also helps that the characters in Cyberpunk 2077 are also well written with interesting motivations and backstories. Well, most of them anyway. There are a few characters and organizations that should have been expanded upon further, most notably the different gangs in Night City, which were advertised heavily in marketing, but in my experience did not really have a lot of time to shine. Also, some of the characters are a bit stereotypical, and it's been an issue with the cyberpunk genre since the 1980s and 1990s. But still, they're mostly well-written stereotypes for what it's worth, and you actually care a lot about them in the context of the main story and side stories. Exactly. Thankfully, the title itself was mostly fun. You have your normal dialogue choices at certain moments in the main story and side stories, but the main thing you'll be doing besides talking is shooting, driving, upgrading your abilities, and more shooting.
Bing, 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 bing.
He's a living weapon. Any mentions of other weapons will excite him. If you couldn't catch on, shooting is basically the main core aspect of Cyberpunk 2077, with tons of different weapons to choose from and having different quirks to them. You could further modify them with different muzzles and scopes. It is overall satisfying to shoot things when your gun doesn't disappear from your hands, although I'd like it better if they had a clearer indication of what ammo uses what weapon. Or wait, was it what weapon uses what ammo? Whatever, same thing. There's also the driving, which is my favorite part about Cyberpunk 2077's gameplay. Riding around Night City on a motorcycle or car is not only convenient, but a lot of fun to take in the environmental design of the area. But its usefulness is lessened somewhat via fast travel terminals and traffic that has other ideas. Besides shooting and driving, you can also upgrade yourself via implants and skill trees. On the earlier, I didn't find myself using the implants as much as I really thought I would be, but I think that ultimately depends on what type of character you're wanting to make. I'd imagine someone more combat-oriented would take full advantage of these implants, while those like me who are more stealth-based might not. An aspect that everyone will likely be using is the skill trees, which are accessed by leveling up those stats and selecting different abilities from a menu. It's a bit confusing at first, the game doesn't really explain it well and you have to figure it out on your own. Besides a much needed better explanation for this, I also feel like there also should be an ability for the player to reset their stats, as certain builds that might lean towards a specific area might not be for them and they may want to try something else. but it's very difficult to do that. Reportedly, the only thing you can do is buying an item worth 100,000 eddies, the in-game currency, that lets you do that. Lastly, there is also a crafting system that allows you to, well, craft items and weapons, but I'm mentioning so little of it because I just did not use this at all until the final boss to craft some medical supplies. I guess for some people it might be useful, but for me, I never used it and did not find it useful at all. This is basically the section of the video where we talk about the other aspects of Cyberpunk 2077 that aren't story or gameplay related. Let's start off with the most obvious thing. The sexual content in Cyberpunk 2077 is really ridiculous. Besides stereotypes, cyberpunk fiction always has an issue when it comes to over-sexualization of men and women. That was even present in the original Cyberpunk 2020. I understand that Cyberpunk 2077 is obviously based on Cyberpunk 2020, a book from the 1980s and 1990s, but come on. Cyberpunk fiction has, for the most part, moved away from this and has reduced over-sexualization except when needed as either world building or a story element. Cyberpunk 2077 feels like a 13-year-old boy made it with the amount of nudity and sexual content that is on by default. You can turn the nudity off, thank goodness, but it makes no indication of that availability, and I had to find out online where the option was. I have no idea why there is so much nudity in this game, because it's not nudity that's really tasteful or makes sense in the larger context of the various stories being told. Also, why are there sex scenes in this title? Really, you couldn't have a fade to black or something like that. Cyberpunk 2077 conclusively doesn't feel like it has anything to say about sexual related things, instead only using them because it can rather than it should. On the bright side, I love the environmental design of Night City. Even on an Xbox One X, it looks fantastic. There are different environments within the city that feel unique to each other, and you'll probably be spending a lot of time just looking around to take everything in. Using photo mode is a must, because there are just some environments and moments you have to capture on camera. I will also say that the items that came with my edition of Cyberpunk 2077 are pretty darn neat, ranging from postcards to a map to even the whole flipping soundtrack, which is an absolute banger, by the way. Cyberpunk 2077 is the most frustrating and difficult game we've had to review or analyze. Because this would be part of the video where I would tell you that it's a fantastic title in spite of its flaws. It does so much right while missing the mark in some areas. But in all honesty, we can't do that. Not in good conscience can we recommend this game until the issues that are happening across all versions of the title are fixed. Maybe then we'll take another look at Night City and even write up an entirely new review and analysis for it that's maybe a bit more detailed than this one. Cyberpunk 2077 is a fantastic game, but a complete technical mess. And so we have to say farewell to Night City. For now.
Well, Night City, good night and good luck.
Hey, not bad for the first time around. Can we be assigned a stable RPG next time around, though? Preferably from Sega?